Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, my friends, Majority Leader John Thune in the U.S. Senate said that there will be a vote. We will have a vote on the Save America Act, which we talked a lot about yesterday. I don't want to rehash that. We'll hit some of the high points, I guess, as we go through today's program. But that can mean one of a couple of things. Number one, they're going to change the filibuster rule. I do not anticipate that happening. Maybe. I don't think so. I think they may actually tell Democrats to put up or shut up here, to actually do a real filibuster instead of a zombie filibuster. We talked about this on yesterday's program. You can check that out. I'll hit on it today. I think I'll give enough context to where it makes sense, but if you want background on that, you can check there. But anyway, pleasure to be there. That's here today. That's what we're going to talk about today, my friends. Let's talk about something important here as we get started, though. Let's talk about your money. You worked hard for it, my friends. In spite of what Washington, D.C. thinks, you worked hard for it, and it belongs to you. But is it working hard for what you believe in? Or worse yet, is it working against what you profess and claim to believe in? At 48 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that do not align with your faith, your values, and they'll help you create a plan that fits your goals and purpose. All you have to do to find out how your current investments line up with your values is take an easy assessment. And you can take that assessment at 48financial.com/Todd. Again, that's 48financial.com/Todd. Take that quick and easy assessment, and you'll see exactly how your current investments stack up against your values. 48 Financial, helping you align your money with your mission. Okay, let's talk about this today. John Thune with Fox News Digital yesterday said that the SAVE Act is going to be getting a Senate vote. Chuck Schumer has said repeatedly that Democrats in the Senate are going to fight, as he put it, tooth and nail to prevent this from being passed. And Schumer says we're fighting against it because this is Jim Crow 2.0. This is pure sophistry, my friends. There is no Jim Crow 2.0. I did a program on this a couple of weeks ago when we talked about this very thing, when this was first being bantered about, the reasons people like Chuck Schumer are supposedly against the Save America Act. Let me just give you really quickly some examples of Jim Crow laws. Now, Jim Crow was a fictional character back in the 1800s, that was used to kind of mock and make fun of black Americans. And this was a period of time, the Jim Crow laws were enacted in a period of time where America was basically coming out of the Civil War. And, we've read the books, we've studied, we've watched documentaries on the Civil War. Most people have done those sorts of things. At least most people that pay attention to politics have. Most people that vote for Democrats, I'm not sure they even know we had a Civil War. But regardless, it's always interesting when you study history. This is just from a purely academic perspective. It's difficult, especially as I've gotten older and our kids are, they're teenagers, or one of them, the youngest is on the verge of being a teenager, the other two are. But as you're trying to communicate things that you've personally witnessed in your life to your children, it's like that they're never going to fully understand it. They're never going to fully understand 9/11. They can see the videos. They can see the footage of what happened on that terrible day in 2001. And they can understand to some degree, but they never quite get it. They never quite can feel the emotion or really put themselves, and it's not them. We all have this weakness. I mean, and I really try to understand when I think about this as it pertains to what I'm talking about here with Jim Crow laws and the Civil War. I mean, America had picked up arms and fired guns at each other over this issue, right? Over the issue of whether the southern states were going to be able to have slaves, and they said it was their right as a autonomous U.S. state, and that you have people who said, yeah, but these are human beings. The abolitionists who said these are human beings made in the image of God. Who do you think you are? This tension rose to the point where people picked up weapons and fired and killed each other. Hundreds of thousands of people losing their lives, and you get through that. And you get through, now think about this too, you get through that through partially, a big part of this, through the leadership of a president named Abraham Lincoln, who's also assassinated. I mean, it's just chaotic times, right? And we have chaotic times now too. It's different, but there's certainly types of chaos. People have shot at Trump. We've had an all-out cold civil war here, but nothing like that, right? Nothing like that. And so they're trying to rebuild this country. You still have racists who are in the South. They don't, they've lost the war, but they're complying with the laws, but then they're trying to do everything in their power to prevent black Americans from really becoming equals to them in society. And so they start passing laws designed to put barriers between black Americans who were formerly slaves or whose family was formerly slaves, and they're trying to prevent them from voting. And so they come up with things like poll taxes. You have to pay to vote. That's not a legal thing to do. That's not a that violates constitutional principles. You can't charge people to vote. You can't give literacy tests. You hear people say things like there should be a test to vote in this country, and I understand where the comment's coming from, right? You got people who don't know anything about anything. The highlight of their day is what was trending on social media. They have no understanding of anything political. They go out and they vote for people who impact the rest of us and our ability to be free and keep what we earn and live in a prosperous economy. And I understand we say, man, these people should have a basic understanding, but this was trying to prevent people from voting because they viewed them as subhuman. They said that these people didn't weren't equal. They weren't created equal in the law or even the eyes of God. That's how some people thought. And so they were trying to find ways. They knew, people who were slaves or families, descendants of slaves, they couldn't always read because it wasn't because they were stupid. It was because they weren't being taught. Imagine no matter how smart you are, if you're taken to another country and dropped into a place where they're reading in Arabic, and they drop a book in your lap, you think you can just pick that up and read. That doesn't mean you're stupid. It means I don't know what those symbols are supposed to mean. And so people use that with these Jim Crow laws to say if you want to vote, you have to be able to read. This is where the term grandfather clause comes in. By the way, the term itself is not racist. The term itself, grandfather clause, describes something that was incredibly racist. And the grandfather clause basically said, if something was the case when your grandfather was alive or whatever, then it could be the case for you. So if your grandfather could vote, for example, then you could vote. And that's like you're grandfathered in. Well, if you're a first generation or even second generation free black American after the Civil War, you couldn't vote because your grandfather was a slave and wasn't able to vote. So there were all white primaries. I mean, that sounds like, remember back in 2016, remember this? They talked constantly about how Republicans, this party of racist Republicans, had nominees on the stage back in 2016. They had Ben Carson, who's a black American, a brilliant black American. You have Marco Rubio was up there, Ted Cruz, they're Hispanic Americans, Bobby Jindal, Indian American. You had Carly Fiorina, who's a female. You had a whole bunch of people up. I'm forgetting people. There were 16. I think Trump was made 17. 17 candidates that were from all different walks of life, all different backgrounds, some really good candidates in that mix. And what did the Democrats give us? They gave us 4 old white guys in a clip. And I remember this. I remember talking about this a lot. Hillary Clinton, of course, was the eventual nominee. And they also have, oh boy, who did they have? I just remember Martin O'Malley because he had a nickname on this program, which many of you liked. I called him Sexy Martin O'Malley. And why did I do that? Well, I'll tell you why I did that really quickly. Martin O'Malley had 1% or some such thing until he went shirtless on a beach in Maryland. He used to be the governor of Maryland. And this impressed people seeing Martin O'Malley shirtless on the beach in Maryland, and he went from 1% in the polls to 2%. And I realized that people that were excited about him were excited about him only because he went shirtless in Maryland, so there the name Sexy Martin O'Malley. And yes, that's how you got to say it. He came to the figure, but this is who they have. This party is not, the Democrat Party is not who they want you to believe it is. These laws were created by Southern Democrats. And they try to tell you today that, the party switched. Democrats were, of course, at one point the party of racists, but all the Republicans became Democrats. All the Democrats became Republicans. And so today, the people who really fought to free the slaves are the Democrat Party, which is completely preposterous. You know that the Republican Party was quite literally founded on the idea of emancipating, freeing the slaves. Literally founded, that was the founding purpose. And their first candidate to be president of the United States was none other than Abraham Lincoln, who, of course, completed that mission. But the left wants you to believe, Chuck Schumer wants you to believe, that that's what the SAVE Act, the Save America Act is. That's why Democrats are standing against these, says because this is Jim Crow 2.0. So that begs the question, let's connect the dots. I've given you some examples of Jim Crow laws. I don't want to spend too much time here because we went through this in a lot of detail recently, maybe a couple of weeks ago. But let's compare again what the Save America Act is. Number one, the Save America Act requires that you provide documentation to prove that you are an American when you register to vote. So I want Chuck Schumer. See, this is why we're going to talk about the filibuster, which I think maybe they're going to actually make them do this. I hope they do. I want to hear Chuck Schumer take to the floor of the Senate, and I want him to tell me how an all-white primary, or how poll taxes, or how literacy tests at the polls is the same thing as requiring proof that you're a U.S. citizen to vote. I want to hear this. I want the American people to hear this. Context matters. Nuance matters. Context is, in fact, king. Why on earth would you call a law that says you have to prove who you are, why would you say that's Jim Crow law? Why? Are you insinuating that black Americans cannot get voter IDs? You know, in my state of Indiana, and this, by the way, this is how this would be done nationally as well. This would be the program. The program is this. If you need an ID to vote, it's free. This isn't a poll tax. This isn't trying to manipulate the system to say squeeze $75 out of somebody who can't afford it. This is saying we just need this for you to be able to participate, because it turns out, I'm on to the voter ID portion. There's two things here. There's proving who you are at the time of registration and proving who you are at the time of casting a ballot. These are common sense things. These are not Jim Crow 2.0 laws. These are common sense 0.1 laws. These are basic, fundamental, commonsensical things that have to be done in any free society who cares about the integrity of its elections. So, you have to prove who you are on the front side, and you have to prove who you are before you cast a ballot. That's all that this does. Friends, in fact, yesterday I got my real ID after struggling with this for some time because I needed to get a new Social Security card. Yesterday I received my real ID. I sometimes want to call it smart ID. It's the same stinking thing. It has a star on it. Now, don't get me started on all this stuff or the lunacy of how the details worked. I mean, I shared with you, I couldn't use my driver's license as an ID with the license branch to get the one with the star on it, the smart ID, or the real ID. But I could use my driver's license to get a Social Security card, and then that's the only thing I needed, and then take that Social Security card and show it to the driver's license, or to the BMV to get a real ID. It doesn't make sense to me. Those are the rules, whatever. So I'm not here to defend every way government works, but I am here to say that, first of all, that ID cost me something. It wasn't overly expensive. It was actually pretty inexpensive. It was like around $10, I think, $9 or $11, something like that. I also had to expedite it because I'll need it when we leave town here next week. But anyway, the point is here that this is part of our society already as it is. You can't do anything without identification, and this is not some unreasonable burden to place on people. This is silly to suggest that this is a Jim Crow law. I shared with you before, I've seen man on the street interviews where some individual goes to a white liberal college campus somewhere and starts asking people about voter ID. Is voter ID racist? And all these white liberals say, well, yeah. And he says, why? And these racist liberals, they say, well, black Americans can't get an ID, and which is absolutely unbelievable to me. They think that they're being helpful. They think that they're being compassionate. That's incredibly racist. Why can't a black American, a minority, get an ID any differently than a white American can? Well, it's insane to think like this, and then they think that we're the racists. You know, there's been studies too. By the way, this is a side note, and this is not in the stack of stuff, but I will tell you this. I saw this recently. They have done studies, and when liberals are around black Americans, they change their vocabulary to use words that are not. Now, this doesn't. Listen, I'm sure that there are liberals that this doesn't apply to, but they've done the studies. The science is here. White liberals, when they're around black Americans, they lower their vocabulary. They try to make it. They use less. They use smaller words, for example. I guess you would say they feel like they have to dumb it down. How crazy is this? And conservatives, when they did the study, there was no discernible difference in the language that they used, the words that they used. But Democrats act like there's a group of people out there that cannot get through life without some policy or some elected official who's taking money from white wealthy Americans and giving it to minority groups. This is not necessary. It's actually very, very racist. But then the guy who was doing the man on the street interviews, after listening to liberals on white campuses tell us how hard it was for black Americans to get voter ID and that voter ID was racist, he then went to Harlem and started interviewing black Americans on the street. And he asked them, do you have an ID? And they were almost offended. Well, yeah, I've got an ID. What are you talking about? Was it hard to get it? What do you mean was it hard to get it? I went to one guy said the BMV or whatever they call it in New York is over on 42nd and whatever. He's just right over there, man. That's where I got my ID. What are you talking about? And he said, well, these college kids, these professors at the white college campus over here, predominantly white campus, they thought voter ID is racist. They didn't think black Americans could get a voter identification. And these people they were dumbfounded. Well, of course I got ID. What do you think I do? I drive a car. I fly on airplanes. I have a checking account. Would that surprise them too? And so this is the mindset. I say that to say all that to say this. This is the mindset. The mindset is, again, who looks at people based upon their skin, talks to them differently, acts like the requirements are acceptable for one group of people but not for another. This is absolute insanity. This is totally ridiculous. The way that this is handled. Who are the ones who are doing this? Based, by the way, on superficial skin color, the pigmentation in their skin, or my skin. That is what they're basing this on. And they want to tell the American people that this law, the Save America Act, is Jim Crow 2.0. Well, go ahead. Explain it. I want to see the vote. I want this thing to pass. And I want you to go to the floor and you tell me and the American people how on earth these things are even in the same universe, the Save America Act and Jim Crow laws. Pray tell, my friends, you can't do it because it's absolute sophistry, and they know it. I hope they make them take the full floor of the U.S. Senate and do a real filibuster for days on end, because I want this question answered. I do. I want it to be answered. I want to see how stupid you sound, Chuck Schumer, whenever you try to explain this, my friends. Anyway, time to take a break. But I want to remind you, friends, we got a partnership with MyPillow. I love MyPillow products. I love the founder and CEO of MyPillow, Mike Lindell. I hope he wins the governor's race in Minnesota. But in the meantime, as he's been doing for years and years now, he's making quality products at MyPillow here in his American, it's American-made with American workers in Minnesota. He's making these products. You can get them at discounts, whether it's MyPillow pillows, whether it's the slippers, whether it's sheets, towels. Friends, there's discounts on all sorts of items there. You can check it out, mypillow.com. If you use promo code Todd, you'll get discounts on just about every product, probably every product. But I always say, there could be one that doesn't have a coupon code that's applicable. But coupon code Todd's going to save you there, mypillow.com. Quick timeout, my friends. Back here in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Bit of a tech problem there after the first segment, so a little bit rattled on our discussion, the path that we're on. I got to get my mind back there, so bear with me as I try to do that. That was we rarely have that, and when it does happen, it definitely can throw a wrench in the gears here internally. But I want to get back to talking about just the mindset of people on the left and how they view groups of people based upon the color of their skin, what part of the world they're originally from, or any number of things like that, for basically saying there's no standards. You can't have any standards. And it's preposterous. As I shared last segment, the man on the street interviews that showed, hey, that these the people that the liberals say can't get IDs absolutely get them, and the IDs that they will have to get as part of this package, it's going to be paid for. It's not trying to extort money out of people. It's not trying to put a barrier between them. Well, it is trying to put a barrier between people who aren't citizens and the voting booth. That's exactly what we should be doing. And with that, we understand as Americans, as reasonable people, that there will be some requirements from us. There should be. What in the world is going on here? If I'm in a foreign country on an election day, I can't just stroll into the polls and expect them to count a ballot that I cast. What is going on here? Citizens should vote in U.S. elections. That should be a full stop. Definitely in federal elections. Some of these local and municipal areas around the country have allowed, think about this, they've allowed people who aren't citizens to vote. That's one of the problems. I defy you to explain to me how letting someone cast one ballot in a local election could not potentially cause problems when we look at, giving them access to a full ballot that would include a national ballot, a race for House, a House seat, a Senate seat, President of the United States. I defy people to explain that to me. These are the same people that need weeks to count ballots. Do you really think that they can be so technologically savvy and so organized that a person who comes in who's not a citizen, who is able to vote in some leftist utopian local election because the people there have lost their ever-loving minds, do you really think that they are prevented from having access to the other ballots? This is crazy talk. Citizens should vote. You should have to verify when you register, and you should have to identify at the polls. What is wrong with this? This is common sense 101. I think if I had a group of kindergartners, it's slightly hyperbolic, but not much. I think if I said, come up with the system where people can legally cast a ballot. We want to make sure that everybody who's legally eligible to vote can vote, but we want to make sure we want to put enough of the onus on people when they register and prove who they are. We want to put enough restriction, enough regulation to make sure that we weed out the people, we filter out the people that aren't supposed to be doing it. I think that they would come up with these things. They would say you have to prove who you are when you register, and you have to prove who you are when you cast a ballot. This is, of course, crazy. Now, we'll see where this goes. I hope Senator Thune and the other Republican senators finally put on their big boy and big girl pants and say, fine, you can filibuster this, but you're going to discuss it. The whole concept of a filibuster is built upon the idea that we don't want debate to end. We want to continue debating it. Yes, I understand it's a tool to prevent legislation from being enacted that your party, that the minority is against. I understand that. But it's predicated on the concept of more debate. The way that the filibuster has been managed in recent years is that there's less debate. If the opposing party says we have more than 40 votes to keep debate going, instead of saying, well, then let's keep debate going, the Senate leadership says, okay, then we won't even talk about the bill. No, let's talk about it. This is something that the American people need to hear. I want to see. Now, Spartacus, we know you can do this. Get up there for 25 hours and tell us how this is a terrible thing. I want to see it. I'm pretty sure Chuck Schumer can't do it for very long. But hey, I want to hear him explain. I've got questions. If he's unsure about what he can say, if he's afraid he's going to not be able to fill the time that he's allotted and continue to talk for long periods of time, I will send you a list of questions, Senator Schumer. I will send you a list of questions that I would like to have answered, that I think the American people would like to have answered. And if this is as bad, you're saying that this is racist. These laws are designed to keep American minorities from voting. That's reprehensible to me. I want you to explain it to me like I'm 5 so that I can come on here and make sure all the listeners who need to, be educated, I guess, like me, I want to tell them as well. I want to come on here and explain just how terrible this is. And I need your help doing it because I don't see anything wrong with this. So I'll send you questions. You don't have to worry about coming up with content unless, of course, you're worried about how stupid what you say is actually going to sound to people with brains. But I would do that. I 100% would send Chuck Schumer questions that I have. Now, I don't know how many I can put together, but listen, if these are open-ended questions, he should be able to use each one of those to talk about for, 10 minutes or so. I would think that he could pull that off. So that's what's going on. We'll see. I don't know. But Senator Thune, according to a Fox News digital interview, said that there's going to be a vote on this. That's what I know. So we'll see what happens. I hope they make them filibuster. Let's get all this out there. If there's so many bad things about this bill, then line up, senators in the Democrat Party, line up for the microphone and be ready to tell us what is so bad, because I want to hear it. I think you owe it to us. If it's as bad as you say it is, and it's keeping my fellow Americans, our listeners' fellow Americans, from voting, I think we need to understand how it's doing that, and we need to make sure that we can explain it to them, or maybe switch our votes to be opposed to this evil, racist Jim Crow 2.0. If that's what you say it is. If it's as bad as you say it is, we should absolutely understand everything that's wrong with it. And I'll tell you, if you can truly demonstrate in a world of sanity, which I know you don't live in oftentimes, but if you can do that to people who are free thinkers, you'll get my support. I will come on here and I will tell my listeners, I will follow my sword and say I was wrong. This is terribly racist. This is not 2.0, it's 3.0, 7.0. I don't know. Whatever it is, I will come on here and do it. But I'll tell you what, that's not how this story is going to end. You're a sophist, Chuck Schumer. You're engaged in political theater. This is not real. It is amazing how we let the narrative become what the left wants it to become. None of this stuff is even remotely close to what this is about. But here, that's what we're talking about, because that's what they're out there saying. And when they say it in the media, I've not seen a single interview when someone said, huh? How is requiring an ID the same as a poll tax when the ID is free, Chuck Schumer? How is it the same as all white primaries? Because I know minorities who have, many of them, they have their identification. Why would this be an all-white primary when it's allowing many people who are minorities to be able to have a path to this? Explain to me. And I wouldn't let him off the hook. He's going to give some simple explanation, some for the simple-minded, for the low-information voter, what have you. He's going to give that. But a real journalist would push back and say, well, wait a minute. Hold on a second here. What about this? That doesn't line up. What about that? Give him the floor on the U.S. Senate. Make him and the Democrats filibuster this thing and explain it. You can send me the transcript. You can highlight the appropriate portions of the transcript, and we'll talk about it. We'll read it on here. We'll analyze it, and we'll share with our listeners just how terrible the legislation is. But here's the truth. I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can do it because I think you're lying. Actually, I know you're lying, but I'm just, for the sake of just playing along here, I'll let you prove me wrong. Prove me wrong, Chuck Schumer. Prove me wrong, Corey Spartacus. Prove me wrong, Pocahontas, and I can say that, by the way. It's official spokesperson of the Pocahontas family here. Prove us wrong. Got to take a break here. My friends, time flies, of course, when you're having fun. Let's face it, though, living with discomfort is tough. And while prescription medications can help, they often come with a long list of side effects, not to mention the risk of dependency. That's why more people are exploring natural options like Kratom from Christopher's Organic Botanicals. Family-run company. They do things the right way. They work directly with Indonesian farmers. They lab test every batch that they bring to market, my friends. No synthetics, no chemicals, no surprises, just natural, honest Kratom that's been used for generations. Start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff. You'll save 10%. Visit Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency, and yes, time out for me, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I want to give you another bit of news here that, again, demonstrates just how people think about this thing. People on the left, we'll talk about it. And I want to do something I wished I would have done yesterday, but I'll do that quickly here in a moment, my friends. Maybe you've reached that stage where managing your money feels like juggling more than just numbers. There's tax planning, there's estate work, there's investment choices, a whole lot more. That's when Family Office Services can really make a difference. Full Suite Wealth brings all those pieces together into one cohesive strategy. Their family office services give you access to a coordinated team with advanced options, strategies, private equity, private credit, legal expertise, all those things, my friends, under one roof. It's about simplifying your financial life, planning for the future, and making sure your legacy stays strong for generations to come. If you are ready for that next level of support, head on over to fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Build your legacy, secure your future. Okay, so, my friends, one other piece of news I want to hit on, just touch on. There was yesterday, bear with me here. Let me pull the article up. Well, first of all, there's an article in Politico that'll be sent out with today's Inner Circle email, which you can access or go to our website at toddhuffshow.com. Politico is now acknowledging that non-citizen voting happens. But it's not very much, right? This is the normal routine. It doesn't happen at all. Well, it happens a little bit. Well, maybe it happens more than we thought it did. Then they try to spin it to say this is actually healthy for our republic. This is what our founders wanted. It's actually good. We should be wanting more of it. That's how this all goes down. But Politico is now acknowledging that what we've been saying all along, which of course is just common sense. I don't know how much it is. That's the problem. I don't know if it's a tiny number of votes. I don't know if it's a massive number of votes. They don't want to talk about it. And they also don't want to talk about anything that would open the gates or lead to the potential of this being a problem. Democrats cheer, this is headlined at thenationalpulse.com, as bid to keep 73,000 voters without ID on rolls succeeds. This was in the state of North Carolina. The elections board there reached a settlement that allowed 73,000 voters who do not currently have what is required for them to be on the voter rolls. So just ask yourself that question. By the way, the Republican National Committee and the the Republican Party in North Carolina filed suit back in 2024. And they claim that there were roughly 250 registrations that lacked the required identification information, which would include things like the last four of someone's social or their driver's license number. After going through this, apparently there's 73,000 voters. They admit now they don't have what they need. The required information is not there. So the first question is, if it's required and they're on the list, how did they get there? I thought these things were safeguards. So you got 73,000 people who don't have this. Instead of removing them from the roll, saying they didn't do what was required, and then maybe acknowledging or telling the people, they're going to let them stay on the rolls, and then when they go to vote in November, then they can prove who they are, providing the required documentation. So that's out there. You can read more about that, again, in the newsletter, or if you go to the website at toddhuffshow.com, just go to today's stack of stuff. And then I want to say this. I'm going to wrap that up for today. That's all I can get to today. But yesterday was marked the 5 years. 5 years. Yesterday marked 5 years since the passing of Rush Limbaugh. Let me tell you right now, this program, I would say, would not exist without Rush Limbaugh. I listened to Rush Limbaugh. I started in the spring, early summer of 1999. That was it'll be 27 years. It's hard to believe. 27 years ago, when I was working on that 200-acre standard-bred horse farm. It was me, a lot of fence row, a lot of property, and horses. That's what it was most days. Sometimes there were folks that helped me, but for the vast majority of the time, it was me, especially through the winter months and things like that. But I was out there a lot by myself, and someone recommended I start listening, and I did, and I fell in love with it. I think it's what I learned on that show. It impacts what I talk about on this program today. And it's been 5 years. I remember doing this show the day after getting notice that he passed away. It was sad for me. Now, of course, the left was celebrating. They're saying, "See you in hell, Rush," and all this sort of stuff. But Again, petulant, childish narcissists who need attention, and it's sick, it's sad, whatever. But I will tell you this: whatever you think of the program, his fingerprints are all over this, because he taught me a great deal. He taught me a great deal. He inspired me a great deal. He inspired me to pick up this microphone and to start in the closet back in August of 2015, 10 and a half years ago. And so I just wanted to take a moment. That's one of the things I want to make sure that we do, is to remember his legacy. He did some wonderful things. Wasn't a perfect man, but did some wonderful things, and certainly inspired me to do what I do today. And you'll still see his fingerprints. I refer to it as the stack of stuff. That's, of course, from Rush, and little things like that are sprinkled throughout the program. But anyway, folks, I wanted to acknowledge that, but I got to run. SDG.